course, the United States is quickly going to replace Russia as India's #1 overseas defense supplier. What has changed for you in a way that today we're talking about technology transfer? It's no longer just a buyer-seller relationship.
I would say two things really have changed. One is the level of trust between the two countries has grown over a period of time. Post 91, I think they've striven to try to build a relationship where they could pragmatically cooperate in areas of convergence and agree to disagree in areas where they might have divergent perspectives. But we've seen this whole process lead to a strategic partnership and then to, intensifying cooperation, which has built trust between the two countries over a period of time. The second is that both have worked fairly systematically to put in place the building blocks of such cooperation. So on India's side, for instance, we have liberalized our FDI policy with regard to defense manufacturing or defense FDI in defense in India. Similarly, in the US, we have seen a concerted effort to liberalize the regulatory framework for defense and high technology exports to India. So when I was ambassador, despite the nuclear deal, we were on par with Sudan at the lowest rung. And we began the process of, changing this. And eventually, India was given the status of major defense partner on par with the US's closest allies. This was followed by the strategic trade authorization, placing India in category 1. And on the other side, India signed many of the foundational defense agreements, which it had hesitated to do before. So an agreement on cooperation in logistics, communications, compatibility and security agreement, cooperation in the exchange of geospatial data, the Industrial Security Annex, which would enable sharing of data and technology by private companies from the US with Indian companies. So a whole framework has been put in place with these building blocks, and the two coming together, the growing trust and these various steps which have been taken on both sides, have finally brought us to the point where we are now able to have an agreement for actual manufacturing, joint manufacturing in India between GE and HAL for jet engine technology, and along with a substantive...
All right, I'm sorry I'm interrupting, Ambassador, but as we see pictures of Prime Minister Modi now embarking on the plane, he will now leave for Washington, D.C. It's a short flight, about an hour or so, and he will then, of course, start the business end of his visit. There's going to be a private dinner later tonight hosted by the U.S. President and his wife. And then tomorrow, of course, is the main day of the state visit, where he will have the ceremonial opening ceremony tomorrow morning, followed by an address to the joint session of the U.S. Congress, and the evening when there will be the state dinner. Michael Kugelman, good time to bring you in. While there's a great degree of commonality and convergences between India and the United States, and as I think President Obama called this the most consequential relationship of the 21st century, fact is also there are differences. There are differences on the Russia-Ukraine war and how these two countries are approaching it.
Visit in United States of America and in Washington, D.C. It is going to be historic because we will forge a better alliance together, more in terms of defense, more in terms of security, more in terms of growth and prosperity, more in terms of science and technology. This is the beauty. India is shining and we are raising to the next level in this work. Please join hands together for the next performance now. But then, yes, I will go for a pause because we are having some amazing messages from our congressmen. from the Congress, from the Senate and Congress here. Amazing people. These leaders of the American society are going to, send some messages out on welcoming Prime Minister Modi in America, and that's what would be played on the screen. But before that, just give a big hand of applause for Modi ji. मोदी है तो मुमकिन है, मोदी है तो मुमकिन है, मोदी है तो मुमकिन है. जय हो, जय भारत. Hail America. Thank you so much. Yeah. Next messages from our respected congressman.
Prime Minister Modi, who is, I don't need to tell anyone here, he is the most popular world leader for a reason. He is unbelievable, visionary.
Mr. Prime Minister, we welcome you to our country and wish you safe and a successful journey.
Welcome you to the United States of America. This visit will serve as another way for India and the United States to strengthen our economic and cultural relationships.
India and the United States have a shared appreciation for democracy. I hope that your visit is successful, and I am confident that it will pave the way for an even stronger and closer partnership between India and the United States.
I would like to extend a warm welcome to Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the entire Indian delegation, and we look forward to the opportunity to expand our already significant engagement with India in the weeks and years to come.
I look forward to hearing from the Prime Minister during our joint meeting of Congress on his vision for India, for India's relationship with the United States, and our shared work together to advance peace, prosperity, democratic values, and stability in the Indo-Pacific. The United States-India relationship will be one of the defining partnerships of the 21st century.
I take this opportunity to address a very important visit by Prime Minister Modi this week. I'm excited that this person is coming to America to extend our goodwill between our two nations in one of the most strategically important relationships we have in the world.
Welcome to Washington, D.C., Prime Minister Modi. The Prime Minister's state visit is a significant moment in the U.S.-India relationship. From our trade and economic engagement to our security cooperation to our people-to-people ties, the India-U.S. relationship is critically important.
I consider it to be one of the most important relationships that we have here in the United States. That's U.S.-India relations. Extremely important to our world, extremely important to both countries, and we are looking forward to hearing Prime Minister Modi address a joint session of Congress.
As far as Prime Minister Modi goes, I admire his life story of working his way up as a waiter, a chai waiter, as a young man, to doing a career in public service. He's an inspiration to young people in India and America to work hard and add value to their community and serve their community at their places in India and America.
तेज हो गया हम अंदर आ गए भाई काम खराब हो जाएगा बोलो अभी हटा दिया हमने अब बहुत तेज हो गया कैमरा खराब हो जाएगा तो अभी काम बातचीत पका पूरा
जा रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं, वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित है अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए।
Let me ask Ambassador Meera Shankar this. Given India's own complications with China, particularly more so after now we're talking about the Predator deal being one of the things that will be announced during this visit. Do you think that this axis, whatever is going to play out between US competition over the next 10, 20, 30 years, surely India will have to face the fallout of that, and that means if there are periods of thaw between Beijing and Washington, it's going to affect India, and if there's periods of competition and heightened rhetoric, that's going to put pressure on India as well. Is there a way in which India can insulate itself and have its own independent relationship with Washington and with Beijing? And sometimes there are going to be differences even with close friends and partners like the US.
Well, if you look at what the US has said it seeks with China, it is to manage and stabilize the relationship. They have called China the country with both the intention and the capability to challenge the US in the medium to long term. And of course, they have talked of cooperating with China where they can, competing vigorously, but avoiding conflict. Now, I would say that for India too, we want to deter China. We want to build our own capabilities for that purpose, so that, there's no easy temptation for China to be aggressive with India on the border. But at the same time, we want to avoid conflict. And the best way to avoid conflict is to shape a more stable balance in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific region. And for that, I think the US will play a critical role. For the US, they're not only looking at India, and when you talk of best bet in Asia and the Indo-Pacific, it makes it sound as though there's nothing else. But the US strategy is more broad-based. It looks at strengthening partnerships with its allies as its first priority. So strengthening partnerships with Japan, Korea, Australia, South Korea, Australia, and now, of course, even the Philippines. And then also building partnerships or strengthening partnerships with strategic partners. And of course, if you're looking at a large country in the Indo-Pacific, which offers an alternative governance model, alternative ideals in a sense politically, and has the capacity to play the role of a stabilizer, then I think India fits that bill. But it's not the only option in the US basket. I think sometimes Indians have this sense that, it's like something which is, all exclusive, but it isn't. And neither does India expect the US to come and fight on its border with China, but we do expect that there could be US support in building our capabilities, particularly in the defense and security sectors, and nor does the US expect that India will come and fight for it. But the two countries working together can certainly, along with other countries in the region, in the Quad and elsewhere, can certainly shape a more stable Asian balance. But at the same time, India will continue talking to China as the US continues talking to China.
Okay, let me give the final word to Michael Kugelman. There used to be a time not long ago when the Indian Prime Minister and the US President used to meet. A significant amount of time used to be dedicated to dealing with Pakistan. I think we can safely say that that dedication of time certainly is not for Pakistan anymore as much as it is for China. How do you see that playing itself out? Clearly, the US wants some degree of normalization of ties between India and Pakistan, but India says unless terror gets fully stopped, there is no way.
Right. Well, we were talking earlier about how there are fewer sticking points in the U.S.-India relationship, and I think for many years Pakistan was a sticking point because of the the alliance between the U.S. and Pakistan, which was always messy but still was there. But indeed, I would argue that here in Washington, you don't really hear much about Pakistan, quite frankly. And I think that the U.S. still wants to maintain a workable relationship with Pakistan, but especially since U.S. forces withdrew from Afghanistan, it's just not a priority. And I don't think that Pakistan will come up all that much during the state visit, except perhaps in the context of how both the U.S. and India continue to worry about the lingering threat of terrorism and the cross-border threat that it could pose to India.
All right, we'll leave it with that. I want to thank all our guests, Michael Kugelman, Ambassador Meera Shankar, Richard Rosso, Adil Nazarian, and Jonathan Wachtel. Thanks very much for joining us. Like I said, just about an hour or so ago, I was witness to what happened on the east side here in New York City at the UN headquarters. Prime Minister Modi leading a delegation of over 1,000 people taking part in Yoga Day celebrations. The Guinness Book has acknowledged this as the one yoga event which had the maximum number of nationalities participating in it. Over 135 is what we're being told. Joining me now is Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office, Dr. Jitendra Singh. Thank you very much, sir, for speaking with us. First things first, like I said, I was witness to that event that happened about an hour or so ago. 135 countries, over 1,000 people attending that. When you saw those images on television, what did you make of it? What does that moment mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. You are there witnessing it yourself with your naked eyes. I think many would be envying you to be witness to the history in making. 180 countries practicing yoga led by India, and this is all a miracle happening because of Prime Minister Modi. Yoga has been there for ancient times with us, but it was Prime Minister Modi whom, after he took over in 2014, he put across a proposal before the United Nations, and it was accepted unanimously. That means the yoga was there, India's capacity was there, the world was ready possibly also to accept it, but we didn't have that kind of leadership which could have projected, which could have put it across the world. And therefore, Prime Minister Modi is not only gifted yoga to the rest of the world, he has also provided them, presented them a way of life which would rather unite them. And as he said in his own words in that brief statement that he made just before the session began, he said yoga is universal. Yes, indeed it is universal. But the realization of its being universal put across by Prime Minister Modi. And that is, I think, a great change we are seeing happening across the world. The entire world, regardless of our affiliations, of our beliefs, of our nationalities, of our races, of our skin color, are getting tied down in a single cord of yoga. And I think this is going to be the new norm of
all right. I also wanted to ask you this,
one nation,
because you're a practicing. I also wanted to ask you this because you're a practicing doctor. There used to be a time when practitioners of modern medicine would not accept alternate forms of medicine, whether it was yoga or homeopathy or Ayurveda. But now increasingly the world is talking about yoga as a means of not just physical well-being, but also emotional and mental well-being. Do you think that bridge has been crossed, that for practitioners of modern medicine like you, yoga is very much helpful in a fit body and a fit mind?
No, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that, Jakar, because it is true that especially in the allopathy science, there was some sort of a cynicism or contempt against the indigenous practices like yoga. Although it has been evidently proved that the specialty that I belong to, diabetes, has evident statistics to prove that there are certain yogasana like Mayurasana, Bhujangasana, Paschimottanasana, Pranayama, which could either reduce the dosage of your anti-diabetic drugs or insulin injections, or could even do away with them. So it could serve as an adjuvant to the management. Also, it could prevent the disease happening. And that again credit goes to Prime Minister Modi. He has introduced in this country for the first time the concept of protective health care, preventive health care, which was not there earlier. Even if one fell sick, they would not bother to get their treatment. Now people are lining up for vaccination, and 220 doses of vaccine administered in this country, which had very, very little aptitude for getting vaccination for the prevention of this disease. So the whole lot of mindset change which has happened as a result of the personal indulgence and motivation led by Prime Minister Modi. And I think yoga is one part of that, as he was also mentioning himself. That's not only about curing of a disease, it's all about wellness. And as he put it in his own words, it gives you mental calm and emotional content. And mental calm and emotional content are also, in one way or the other, related with the psychosomatic effect and the other effects impacting the possibility of a disease happening, particularly lifestyle diseases like diabetes, hypertension, heart attacks, etc. So I think there's a whole lot of scientific thinking behind this. Prime Minister Modi has always had a very strong scientific temper in every pursuit that he takes up.
All right, Dr. Jitendra Singh, as always, a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us on this special broadcast of Brass Tacks. We've been speaking to a whole bunch of personalities, people who've been involved in diplomacy, in the think tank world, on what the expectations are as Prime Minister Modi now moves from New York City to Washington, D.C., where the business end of his visit will begin. I caught up with Ambassador Kenneth Juster. He was the former U.S. ambassador to India. He was there when Donald Trump was president, and he oversaw the transformation of one of the key aspects of the U.S.-India relationship, which is now bearing fruit, and that is the defense cooperation, the military-to-military cooperation. I spoke to Ambassador Juster on his expectations from this visit. Prime Minister has made a lot of visits to the U.S., I think 6 times before. This is his first visit as a state visit. What do you make of why this visit is so important?
Well, I think this is the next step in enhancing the strategic partnership between our two countries, and it's going to lean heavily on the defense pillar and the technology pillar of the relationship. And the fact that it's a state visit just gives it further high profile and shows the closeness between the two countries and the President and the Prime Minister.
How do you, when it comes to a state visit, there's always, the pomp and ceremony and, all the traditions involved. How do you separate that from the substantive part of the visit?
Well, I think they actually go hand in hand. I think there's going to be a lot of substance in this visit. There's potentially going to be the announcement of a deal to transfer GE manufacturing technology to India and co-produce jet engines there. There's going to be perhaps a sale of armed drones to India, and there are going to be a variety of other issues relating to critical and emerging technologies. And the importance of that is only enhanced by the fact that there'll be a lot of ceremony and, as you said, pomp and circumstance between the two countries, so it'll make the whole several days quite significant.
It's also more television friendly when you have all the pomp and grandeur and stuff. But let's talk about the substantive bit. You talked about the defense partnership, whether it's the GE jet engine deal, whether it is the Predator armed drone deal. For the longest time, the feeling was it was a transactional relationship. It was buyer and seller. India used to buy, the US used to sell. But do you think that's now moved into a more substantive transfer of technology kind of partnership?
Well, I never felt it was a transactional relationship. I think one of the important elements has been the people-to-people relations and the importance of the Indian-American diaspora and even Americans that live in India. And so it's a relationship in which there's been a building up of mutual interests and things that are exchanged, but also underlying by the fact that we have a tremendous of our backgrounds and heritages.
But specifically on the defense partnership, and you're well aware of this, for 30, 40 years, the US and India never did any defense partnerships. It's only in the last 20 years or so, and you were ambassador when those foundational agreements were signed. How important was it to build that base before we can now have all of these deals that will likely get announced?
I think it's been very significant. First, we've increased over the last 20 years arms sales from virtually nothing to over $20 billion. We've engaged in increasingly complex military exercises, not just on a bilateral basis, but with other countries, and even now on a tri-services basis. We've had exchanges of military officers at various bases, and we've now, as you said, signed foundational agreements for logistics coordination, for secure communications, for sharing geospatial information, and for industrial cooperation. All of that builds on each other to the point now where we're going to be able to have hopefully some major technology transfers and sales, and also increased cooperation on critical and emerging technologies. But the technology relationship goes back 20 years when we first created a high technology cooperation group.
And that's now been sort of reinvented, you reckon, as the strategic trade partnership?
There's now a U.S.-India strategic trade dialogue that is really the same as the high technology cooperation group, but rebranded. But again, with the Undersecretary of Commerce for Industry and Security in the United States, who oversees dual-use technology items, coordinating with the Foreign Secretary for India.
I'm curious to know your thoughts on this critical emerging technologies, particularly in the context of what we're seeing between China and Taiwan, the escalated rhetoric that's been there. Why is it important for, one of the phrases that a lot of US officials are now using in the last 3 or 4 months is de-risking from China. Why should India be that de-risk component?
Well, I think these are different issues that are converging. India and the United States would be advancing their technology relationship regardless of whether we were de-risking from China or not. But the fact that countries don't want to be so dependent on China and want to have other supply chains and sources for semiconductors and other technology simply enhances the U.S.-India relationship and adds further impetus to it.
And how and why has this suddenly come to the fore that, almost 90% of the world's semiconductors are manufactured in Taiwan by one company? Did it just so happen, or is the world now really waking up to diversifying the semiconductor supply chain?
Again, I think if you looked 5 years ago, no one talked about supply chains. And what COVID brought to light was the importance of supply chains and critical dependencies and working with trusted partners. And folks looked around and realized that over time, a lot of the manufacturing of semiconductors had become concentrated in one place, and we now want to diversify that and do so to trusted partners. And that's where India comes in, and the United States cooperation and working together with India in this area.
Let's talk a little bit about the global context in which this state visit is happening. Of course, the Russia-Ukraine war is still going on, and frankly, there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. How much has that changed, not just the security architecture, but just the very conversations that leaders are having these days?
Well, the United States and India don't necessarily see eye to eye on every aspect of the Russia-Ukraine war. I think both countries would like to see an end to that war if possible, and are against any infringement of territorial integrity and sovereignty. But we also recognize our differences and are able to talk about them openly and candidly. But one of the aspects is that India, which has been heavily reliant on Russia for military equipment in the past and spare parts, may be realizing that that's going to be an increasing challenge in light of Russia's own decline, and maybe that's another reason for accelerating some of the defense cooperation with the United States and getting some technology that can increase India's own ability to manufacture military hardware indigenously.
Talking about the threat that is the dragon in the room, as it were, which is the China threat. India's, of course, had its own problems with China over the last couple of years, in fact 3 years now, since Galwan, and the incident happened at the border. Now there is a talk, and especially more so after Secretary of State Antony Blinken went to Beijing earlier this week, and there is more and more talk about a possible US-China thaw. What may that mean for India and India's own sort of complications with China?
I think neither India nor the United States want to have a conflict with China. India would like to have a thaw as well if the Chinese would pull back from its northern border. And I think both countries agree, and countries in the region, that to the degree the relationship with China can be managed and there can be a floor on it and guardrails around it, that would be better. But at the same time, the United States, India, and other countries want to construct a positive architecture for the Indo-Pacific region that will promote their own stability and prosperity, not necessarily focused on China specifically, but focused on the positive elements of what it means to have freedom of navigation and freedom of overflight, peaceful resolution of disputes, no predatory financing for economic development. Those are the things that both countries and their like-minded partners want to work on.
And finally, just to take forward, you talked about the people-to-people contacts, how the diaspora has been always invested in this relationship. So in a sense, the governments are sort of catching up with the people. The people were ahead of the curve.
Well, it's been interesting. There have been times when the people-to-people relationship has been ahead of the governments, and there have been times when the governments have been ahead of the people-to-people, and it's gone back and forth, but they are mutually reinforcing. And if you step back and look at what's been accomplished in the U.S.-Indian relationship over the last 22 years, it's remarkable. And I'm not sure anyone in 2001 could have envisioned all that we're doing today in 2023. And credit goes to everyone who's worked to make that happen.
And it's getting reflected in a way in the bipartisan support that India has on the Hill. Now, again, we have the Prime Minister addressing a joint session of the Congress, invited by a Republican speaker, and the next day he'll be meeting the chair of the Senate, the Vice President. So on both sides of the aisle, it seems to be that, India is the country to back, and this is the long-term bet for America in Asia.
Well, I think this has been true in the United States and in India, that the relationship has increasingly garnered support from across the political spectrum, and it's one of the areas that there is agreement on in the United States, that the U.S.-India relationship is an important one. It'll be a consequential one in this century, and that people support a strong U.S.-India partnership.
All right, so the Prime Minister's visit is now well and truly underway. What does it mean for non-resident Indians, persons of Indian origin? Joining me now is Mr. Jagdish Sewani. He's the President of the America-India Public Affairs Committee. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. This, I believe, is his 7th visit to the US, but the first state visit. As NRIs, what are your expectations from the visit?
Well, you rightly said it is his 7th visit, but first state visit. That shows how much importance America is giving to India, Bharat, and to Narendra Modi. Thanks to the leadership of our Prime Minister, today America has invited Narendra Modi on a state visit. This means a lot not only for India, but today we are 4.5 million strong. I believe we Indians, Americans have played very important role in forging a relationship between US and India. It has become people-to-people relationship. Today, most of senators, congressmen, a mayor of New York City is on our hotline. When we call them, they listen to us. This is, I would say, a charisma of not only we Indian Americans, but of Narendra Modi.
So tell me, you said that the Indian Americans have become an influential community, a community that can, that is seen as progressive, getting things done, of course, highly educated, entrepreneurial.
Absolutely.
Just in terms of what may this mean politically in America? We've seen the Howdy Modi event that happened a few years ago. Now President Biden is hosting the state visit for Prime Minister. How important has the Indian American community become from a vote bank point of view?
See, vote bank point is very important. We are 4 means about 1.52% population. I have to request our Indian brothers here to go and vote, because the politicians understand only one language, that's the language of vote. My local politicians do complain that a lot of Indians don't vote here. And through your channel, I want to awaken them, wake them up. Yes, we vote them, we do a lot of funding for them, but they are interested in our votes. And this is our, I would say, power that I'm sure last week, I'm sure you're aware, that New York City has declared Diwali as a holiday, a school holiday. This is a first step. We want Diwali should be a national holiday. Like in Bharat, we have Christmas, it is a national holiday. This is the way it should be in America also. But this is the first step, it's a baby step, and I'm sure it will happen.
I just want to talk a little bit about, the IT crowd, the high-tech crowd. They've always had these concerns about H-1B visa, the time taken for green cards, etc. What can be done to expedite that?
Yes, I think that's a very good question, and it's really concern of a lot of my friends who are in IT, especially I'm sure you're aware that a lot of layoff was done in IT, and their life is in totally shambles. It's not only them, but their family, and the best part is their kids are born in USA. They are USA citizens, but they cannot stay here. So we are trying our level best that they should get their green card. And I am sure the Biden administration is looking at us, at that problem and issue, whatever we call it, nicely, and they will get it done.
Also, I want to ask you, a lot of the NRIs here I was speaking to are also saying that, we now want to give back to India, whether it is monetarily or any other form. Obviously, a lot of you came here in the 70s, 80s for education reasons, some of them for employment reasons. Is it easier now for NRIs to invest back in India?
Absolutely, much. I think to some person I said that this is a payback time for us. Today we are so prosperous community here. I'm a mechanical engineer. I did my engineering in Bharat with hardly few hundred rupees or 1,000 rupees tuition fee. And today what I am, the credit should go to my Bharat Mata. And I'm so prosperous. And today time has come for me to give to my country back. And this is the 75th year of independence. We are entering into Amrit Kal, like our Prime Minister says. So next 25 years will be a defining moment for Bharat. I personally feel, I used to say this many years ago, that this decade and this century belong to Bharat. But at that time people used to laugh at you. Jagdish bhai, aap to kya hai? Parivar ke, you always think about Bharat and all, aapko kuch samajh mein nahi aata. But today when company like McKinsey, Deloitte and Touch, they say that India has arrived. India is going to be the top 3 economy in the next 10-20 years. According to me, India will be number 1 economy in the world in 2047. With current leadership of Modi, I would like to request opposition in Bharat for 10 years, just forget about petty politics. Let's, in the interest of Bharat, let's all work together and see how we can make Bharat as a Vishwaguru. It is doable. And I want to tell Narendra Bhai also, me and including a lot of my NRI friends, we want to come back to India and tell us what we can do for Bharat so that India can become a Vishwaguru.
So, I'm sure, Jagdish Saab, when you came to US, there was this whole concept of brain drain, the best educated minds are going to America and so on. Do you see a reverse brain drain happening?
I think it has already started happening, especially people we call our generation of $20. At that time, they used to give us only $20 to come to this country. So from there we have come, today, most of the hotel industry, more than 50% is owned by Indians. If you see top 50 Fortune 500 company, CEO, CIO, CFO is of Indian origin. So they all think about, because they are there because of India, because of Bharat. All those IIT graduates, IIM graduates, they owe to us, and they are really fully passionate about India, and they want to do it, and they will do it.
उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह-जगह से मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए।
Modi!
जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए।
Bolstering.
जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए।
Moदी!
जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए।
Modi!
जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन।
A very warm welcome. You're watching CNN News 18's special coverage on Prime Minister Modi in America. I'm Akanksha Swaroop, and let's begin with some breaking inputs that are coming in. We are now learning that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just landed in Washington DC. As we all know, today, just a while ago, he emplaned from New York City for Washington DC, and the latest that we are bringing to you is the landed in Washington DC. Let me inform you that this visit of the Indian Prime Minister to Washington DC is particularly significant and marks a new high as far as India and US ties are concerned. A lot rests upon Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington DC, because remember, there will be a host of events that he will be also attending, but most importantly, there will be a host of bilateral meets that will be taking place in the White House, and not to forget the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be addressing the US Congress. At the heart of his agenda lies a breakthrough as far as technology and bolstering defense ties are concerned. Let's try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of how Prime Minister Narendra Modi is aiming to do that, and for that let me bring in my guest today. I'm joined in by Tekinder Parmar, who is the tech features editor of Insider. Many thanks to you, Tekinder, for very patiently awaiting your turn, because first of all, I know that there's been a lot of back and forth with regards to Prime Minister's landing, but now that we know that Prime Minister Modi is in Washington DC, tell us, what can we expect as far as critical emerging technology is concerned? Because remember, there was a very significant meet as far as ISET is concerned. Delegations from India and the United States met just some days ago. Will Prime Minister Modi's visit be able to take that meet forward in terms of critical emerging?
Right. I think this is a very pivotal moment in Indian and US relations, especially when it comes to technology. And we see that on two fronts. The first front is defense technology and the agreements that are being made about the production of jet engines in India. The second one has to do with consumer technology and semiconductors, and Silicon Valley looking towards India as a new manufacturing powerhouse. Both of those things are fundamental shifts in how both the U.S. business industries and the U.S. military-industrial complex has seen India, and is a huge coup for the Modi government.
Right. And when we talk about Prime Minister Modi giving that boost, we also know that, the regulatory framework in terms of critical emerging technology being offered by the US was very tight. But a lot has started changing as far as that US had Barack Obama as its president, and of course we do see President Biden also taking that framework forward and perhaps loosening it a bit. Where are the hurdles?
Right. I mean, I think that's a very interesting point you raise, and we should dwell on that a little bit. Fundamentally, what we have seen is a shift in the US's approach to India when it comes to the military. Traditionally, the Indian government has sourced its jet engines and military technology from Russia, and that's because Russia allowed a transfer of technology that allowed manufacturing in India. The US traditionally did not do that. Now we are seeing that shift, but those shifts, it rides on Modi's visit right now. That technology hasn't started being developed in India, but I know that people at Hindustan Aeronautics are keenly awaiting the outcome of this State Department visit.
Right, Tikender, the US NSA and the Indian NSA have been in touch. I want to know from you how much has already been designed during that very significant ISET meet that took place in terms of that critical emerging technology. And we are now hoping that Prime Minister Modi's visit will only bolster further in terms of whatever was concluded from that meet. If you could throw more light and explain what were those crucial points that emerged out of that ISET meet.
Right. I mean, I think that this meeting is definitely an evolution of previous attempps by the Indian government to, the Indian and the US government to bolster their relations. And what you are seeing now is a continuation of that development. You are seeing sort of further promises, you are seeing further agreements that will only strengthen US and India ties.
This was a meet that we are talking about, whether it was between Ajit Doval or even if we talk about Jake Sullivan. But let's also talk about the defense aspect of it, something that you duly highlighted. The defense secretary from the United States, Lloyd Austin, was very much in India. He had a meet with India's Raksha Mantri, Rajnath Singh. It's expected that Prime Minister Modi will in fact be only shaping up the outcome of that meet. And when we talk about the outcome of that meet, where have been the hurdles as far as strategic defense cooperation between India and the United States are concerned?
Right. I mean, India has always maintained a certain independence when it comes to towing the American line. And I think what you are seeing right now is a interesting shift in that, right? The fact that the United States is agreeing to share this technology means that it's trying to meet India where it's at. And the background of all of this is China, right? This is China is a perceived threat to both US dominance and also to India in its own backyard. But the question remains, at least in my point of view, what does this mean for the Indian government and its relative independence when it comes to the global stage in terms of what it means when it sort of falls in line lockstep with American foreign policy and when it chooses to be independent.
How do you view this visit in terms of whatever has been Joe Biden's geopolitical agenda vis-a-vis India's changing pivot in terms of defense dependability? So far, as you also mentioned, it was Russia, and now we see this tilt towards the United States. Many experts, especially foreign policy analysts, are posing the question, will Washington be able to find that dependable ally in New Delhi?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, it's clear that that is where things are heading, and that's a huge shift for American policy. It was traditionally China that America put its eggs in China's basket, or sorry, it was traditionally Pakistan that in the subcontinent that America saw it as its key ally. But you see that shifting, and this visit, I think, is the fundamental solidification of that shift.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned China, because when we talk about India and the United States, we know that both the countries are on the same page when it comes to China. But when it comes to Russia, that's actually the crucial bone of contention, which is where the differences lie. Will New Delhi be able to assure the United States of being that trustworthy ally that perhaps the United States is looking for, or will New Delhi keep its options open? That's also another significant question that's coming to mind as I speak to you.
Right. I mean, to be honest, I don't think that at present New Delhi can technology. A contract for the development of jet engines doesn't preclude the fact that India has traditionally relied and is still reliant on Russian technology when it comes to its defense.
Right.
That's not going to change overnight, but that's one of the key factors when it comes to India deciding how it stays neutral with the Ukraine conflict. If that changes, and we are seeing that change happening as we speak, you can say that probably within we are seeing a shift in that direction. It hasn't happened yet, but we are seeing a shift in that direction.
Right, and let's talk about countering China via technology, because that's also another way to sort of counterbalance China's ascendancy in Asia and in the Indo-Pacific. Let's talk about how, with China's dwindling economy, there are major manufacturing units that are looking to invest in India, especially in the southern parts. We've already seen Foxconn target its factories at states like Karnataka, Telangana, Tamil Nadu. Today we've also seen another significant meet happen between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Elon Musk, where the Tesla CEO has also suggested that he is considering opening up a unit in India. But what of course caught my attention was the fact that he did not really highlight a timeline. He said we will try and do it as soon as possible. This despite the fact that he said that he's a fan of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Right. I mean, I think we're seeing a huge win for the Indian middle class with American technology companies looking towards India as the next manufacturing powerhouse. But there are still big questions, right? So if you look at semiconductors, semiconductor exports from India have increased about 30-fold. That's an amazing number for a developing country. But with that is the question of, with these critical technologies that require a lot of precision manufacturing equipment, can India handle it when it comes to power cuts, when it comes to supplies and things like that? That's something that Taiwan has done a very good job of. India obviously has its own hurdles in the way of meeting those energy demands. But at the same time, this visit is clearly showing that Silicon Valley leaders, that Modi are looking towards the country as a replacement for its over-reliance on China.
That again brings me back to that critical question, Tekendra, that there have been barriers when it came to the United States sharing critical emerging technology with India. Could you throw more light in terms of what these barriers have been? And Prime Minister Modi, of course, from what we are learning, is certainly hoping to breach those barriers through this visit.
Right. I mean, this comes back to India's insistence on the transfer of technology, right? And this is very important because for India, a country that has gone through several wars, during wartime, you do not want to be relying on XYZ country for the import of crucial parts. You want to be able to build those things within the country. America has traditionally not cared about that when it comes to selling weapons to countries in the global south. It considers the typical American approach has been, it is our technology, we're going to keep it. And that has kept this relationship from growing. Now you see that increasing. You see a cursory agreement to say, hey, yes, we can build these things in India, and we'll give you the technology in order to do that.
Right.
So that's a major shift.
Right, and in fact, there's a lot that we want to discuss, because remember, Washington, D.C., where Prime Minister Modi has just landed, is going to be that hotspot where Prime Minister Modi will also be interacting with various CEOs. Let's not forget, there'll be Satya Nadella, there'll also be a host of many others who will be waiting in attendance. All right, and before I bring you some ground reports, you're also getting in live visuals. These are the live shots that we're bringing to you from Washington, D.C., as Prime Minister Modi, as we are learning, has disembarked his aircraft after landing just a while ago, and it was only a couple of hours ago that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, enplaned for Washington, D.C. from New York. Remember, it was a very happening day in New York City, because Prime Minister Modi, in fact, led the International Yoga Day celebrations at the UN headquarters, and now, which is where, in fact, he also displayed the soft power of yoga. And having said that, we've already witnessed the kind of diaspora outreach that's been made by the Indian Prime Minister, something that's not new to Narendra Modi. Remember, this is his 7th visit, even though the first maiden state visit for the Indian Prime Minister. The kind of popularity that Prime Minister Modi has been welcomed by as far as the Indian American community, not just in the United States but all over the globe, is concerned, is not new to to you from Washington, D.C., where we should expect Prime Minister Modi to just walk out of the aircraft any time from now. As I've been also, in fact, on the right side of your screen, you can see visuals of the Indian diaspora that have gathered in full force to welcome Prime Minister Modi at the airport. And having said that, in fact, let me bring in Tikendra, who continues to stay with us. Tikendra, let's also shift back a little. Let's rewind to what happened in New York. We've, in fact, witnessed some heartwarming visuals of the Indian American community, welcoming Prime Minister. He was greeted with a rousing welcome. As I mentioned, this is not new for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but he's very skillfully used the soft power of yoga to sort of meet a more hard outcome that India is currently focusing on with the United States.
Right. Brooklyn hipsters and the everyday aunties in New Delhi. It's a loved passion of a lot of people, and I think that the Modi government has really
right.
But
I do believe that it is, in fact, reports and statistics are suggesting that it is the most popular wellness regime outside India. If you in the United States, after India, it is most popular in the United States.
Yeah, I believe that. There's a yoga studio about 2 blocks away from my house, so
right.
that makes complete sense to me.
Right, and what's the sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, I want to sort of also touch on this point about how this soft power has also changed a major dynamic for the Democratic Party that has been usually a little more hesitant on Narendra Modi's background and his role in certain incidents in India, including the Gujarat riots. We're seeing a lot of liberal congresspeople and lawmakers in the United States also joining in on these state dinners. I think on the last list that I saw, the invite list also includes Khanna, Parmala Jayapal, among other people.
But that's also partly to be credited to the fact that we have more Indian American politicians now walking the corridors of power in the United States. Having said that, as far as bipartisan support is concerned, don't you think that Prime Minister Modi has skillfully managed that kind of bipartisan support, whether it was during the government of Barack Obama to all the way to Donald Trump, and now back to a Democrat president, that is Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you wouldn't see this significant shift in American foreign policy towards India if it wasn't for the bipartisan support. And you see that extending to the business, Silicon Valley. You see that extending on the American stage. It has been a huge win for the Modi government.
And second, as someone who belongs to the community, I want to know from you what has been the sentiment like, because the visuals that we've been getting from the airport or outside Prime Minister's hotel, Lotte, in New York City, we've only seen people from all communities, from all over the United States gather in full force to welcome Prime Minister Modi. Throw more light in terms of the kind of power that the Indian Prime Minister wields over the Indian diaspora in the US.
Right. I mean, I think that's a complicated question to answer, right? Because by and large, the Modi government is hugely popular, not only in India, but among NRIs. But there's still a young Indian community that can still contend with the fact that development sometimes is coming at cost of that those questions are going to go away with this visit and with the change of these foreign policies. For example, when we see the manufacturing of semiconductors in India, the question in the back of my mind is, will India be able to do a better job than Foxconn, where there's in those factories from killing themselves because of the brutal working conditions? Those are huge questions that will cloud this visit, but will probably not go answered. So
no, that's a very interesting point that you made, and do in fact expand a bit more on the kind of challenges when we talk about not just critical emerging technology, but even when we talk about deepening those defense ties. What are the challenges that will now turn up at the table when Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi in fact sit face to face?
Right. I mean, I think one of the big things that we'll see is the hope from the American government that this will mean government works in more lockstep when it comes to
all right.
I'm
so sorry to interrupt you, Tekendra. In fact, we are getting in live visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi now disembarking his aircraft at Washington DC. I see there's a grand welcome over there, and I'm sure it in fact is a cloudy day in Washington DC, and that perhaps also explains a bit of a delay in Prime Minister Modi's flight. And I can see a host of dignitaries and the Indian delegation are very much present at the airport, right outside, all stationed outside the aircraft, where most of the dignitaries I can see are carrying umbrellas, and Prime Minister Modi is taking a moment to in fact greet some children who have also arrived at the airport. And in fact, this is right outside the aircraft. As soon as Prime Minister Modi in fact disembarked, he's been welcomed by these Indian American children. As you can see, perhaps they are children of some Indian dignitaries or ambassadors. And on the left side of your screen, you can also see the American delegation that has arrived to welcome Prime Minister Modi. And with that, let me quickly go back to Tekendra. Yes, Tekendra, please go ahead and share the challenges that we were discussing about in terms of deepening tech and defense ties.
Right. I mean, there are challenges that we'll see on the global stage, and we'll see challenges in India as well. So one of the ones that I was talking about is I think this the deepening of ties will definitely mean that America will be looking at India and asking, is this a country that is going to be working in closer step with America's views abroad. The second factor is the impact on the Indian middle class. The country grows, as these companies start entering India, you will see a huge involvement of Indian labor in tech manufacturing. And the question that I have is, will the Indian government be able to assure adequate labor standards for those people, or will those move to the wayside of development?
Right, and in fact, let me also, for the benefit of all our viewers who are tuning into CNN News 18, these are the live and exclusive shots that we're bringing to you of Prime Minister Narendra Modi receiving that grand welcome at the airport in Washington DC. And you can see it's a cloudy day, let's also dip into the light. Windy and a very rainy day, Prime Minister Narendra Modi receiving still a grand welcome at the airport in Washington DC. He's just disembarked the aircraft, where he was greeted not just by the dignitaries from India but also from the United States. And in a short while from now, let me also take you through what you can expect from this very significant visit of the Indian Prime Minister to Washington DC. This is where the most curated interactions between the Indian Prime Minister and the CEOs will also take place. But equally important is the bilateral meet that will take place between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden. Not to forget, the Indian Prime Minister will also be addressing a joint meeting of the US Congress. Having said that, this is the visit that's being touted as a turning point for Indo-US ties. Because remember, this is also the first time, even though Prime Minister Modi has visited the United States 6 times already, but during this 7th visit, which is his state visit, is when we can expect a lot to change as far as the existing relationship between the two countries is concerned, especially when it comes to critical emerging technology and even defense ties. In a while from now, you can expect Prime Minister Modi to be attending a very important program which will in fact be focused on skilling for the future, as it's being called. This initiative will be aiming to prioritize skill development and capacity building for the younger population. Tekendra, if you are still with me, I want to ask you about the skill development and the capacity building for younger population, how much it means for US, and of course, as we all know, there's a significant Indian American community which is part of that youth labor force in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, overshadowing all of this is the rise of artificial intelligence, right? And that's going to have a huge impact not only in the US on skilled labor in the United States, but also in India. So one example that I can see artificial intelligence having a huge impact on is BPO and outsourcing, which makes up a large number of the youth workforce in India. The question is, how do we train that workforce, at least in my mind, to overcome the obstacles of what happens when artificial intelligence is able to do some of the basic jobs of customer service better than a human being can. In the United States, we're seeing a similar shift in how skilling workers for the future, where there are questions of how workers will be how workers will be involved in the green revolution and implementing cleaner technologies. There's obviously the questions around AI as well. So I'm excited to see what comes out of that, because both countries definitely need to be thinking about what it means for the future of work, especially for young people.
And that's a very, very crucial, important point that you're making when it comes to the future of the labor force, not just in the United States, but also in India, because remember, with the artificial intelligence, which as we all know is proving pivotal, there are fears which have already been raised that this may not prove to be as beneficial, but then it's the balance that is what is being targeted. How will this impact the already existing understanding between India and the United States, something that they arrived upon during the ISET meet? What will be the challenges when we look at incorporating artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of challenges that are going to be transnational, right? So the question of how artificial intelligence uses training data from non-Western countries is a big one. There are challenges when it comes to the labor force and what it means for labor forces in more in developing countries. All of these things are things that are all of these questions are going to require some form of bilateral, transnational regulation, which necessitates collaboration between countries.
All right, Tekeder, I need to let you go now. Thank you so much for bringing in your precious inputs and for joining us with that precious perspective on how technology is going to shape and deepen ties between Washington, D.C. and New Delhi. It's been a pleasure to have you on my show. And with that, let me also introduce my next guest. I'm also joined in by Lester Munson, who's a senior fellow of the National Security Institute. Many thanks to you, Lester Munson, for joining in. We're in fact witnessing history in the making. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his maiden state visit, finally landing in Washington, D.C. How much rests upon this state visit of the Indian Prime Minister, and why is this being billed as a turning point for Indo-US ties, Lester?
Well, I think it comes at a very propitious moment for the United States, particularly for the Biden administration, which has really been going through a lot of acrobatics on its foreign policy of late, dealing with competition with China, dealing with the situation in Ukraine. So this visit comes at a very opportune moment for President Biden, who is looking to demonstrate his statesmanship qualities. He can build alliances and solve problems in the world. The visit of the Prime Minister is a wonderful opportunity for him there. And of course, you mentioned earlier the Prime Minister's address to the joint session of Congress. This is a very big deal. Congress is a huge part of U.S. foreign policy and U.S. national security strategy. So his presence there is a big win, I think, for U.S.-India relations. Congress has been a friend to India, growing more and more every year, and this is a nice capstone on that effort that has taken several years to build.
When you talk about the U.S. Congress playing that critical role, especially when it comes to defense ties, deepening those defense ties, how might the outcomes of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's visit to India shape the existing conversation on defense and technology, especially what is going to take place between President Biden and the Indian Prime Minister?
Well, obviously, there's a huge potential for growth in U.S.-Indian relations, and in particular in cooperation on the defense side. Of course, the meetings of the Quad grouping, which is China, the United States, Japan, the United States, India, and Australia, have been very significant for the Indo-Pacific region, for all of the countries involved, and have sent a really important signal, I think, to other countries in the region that there can be collaboration from countries that share democratic values and respect the rule of law. These are huge achievements, and those ties are going to grow into the defense sector, I think, in a significant way. We want to see them, I think, grow slowly and responsibly. This is not something people should jump into, but it's very significant that this visit is happening now on a number of fronts.
Absolutely, Lester, and I'm sure it speaks volumes of the fact that this is Prime Minister Modi's maiden state visit, despite his already previous visits that in fact they are 6 in number. Taking those into account, many want to question the fact that why is deepening of those defense ties taking place now during his 7th visit, which of course is also his first state visit. Why couldn't that happen earlier?
Well, I think this is the culmination of years of effort. This goes back, at least in my memory, as far back as the George W. Bush administration on the United States side. So 20 years, this effort has been building for a long time. The dynamics in the global order are changing. We all know what they are. China is growing. Other countries are growing. The influence of others is waning. India is becoming more important every day. The United States shifting alliances and relationships while trying to maintain kind of a leading role on a number of these fronts, at least in that community of nations that embraces democracy and the rule of law. Has been a challenge for American policymakers on a number of levels in both parties. So President Biden, I think just has a terrific opportunity here to continue advancing the ball that really has been rolling for quite some time.
What are the most pressing issues that the United States and India will be tackling when it comes to China? And I want you to incorporate not just from defense point of view, but also from the point of the timing of this visit is very significant. You're looking at a dwindling Chinese economy where several manufacturing units are now trying to shift focus from China all the way to India.
This is a huge opportunity for India to demonstrate a receptivity to the concerns of the business community while still maintaining things that benefit the Indian nation and the Indian people. So this is the U.S. and other countries are much more wary of investment in China because of the behavior of that country in a number of areas, from human rights to geopolitical concerns to the way it treats its direct neighbors, the respect for human rights and the rule of law inside China, issues with Taiwan, issues with Hong Kong. So this kind of new thinking in the U.S. and in Europe as well, it's really just such a magnificent opportunity for India to embrace the moment. India's, and I think the Prime Minister is doing a very terrific job of this, making the rounds, showing people that India is open for business and that it is not just an alternative to China, but a brand new opportunity for folks who are concerned about these issues of human rights and democracy to have a more sustainable future and to really develop in a way that can last for generations and not just a few years.
Right. Lester, in fact, there's a lot to talk about on that front as well, and how perhaps India and the United States can work together to counterbalance the ascendancy of China, especially in the Indo-Pacific. I'm going to request you to continue staying with me because, in fact, we have a lot of live elements pouring in on this live rolling coverage as we speak of Prime Minister Modi's. Now we're slipping into a quick break. We'll be back with the latest statement.
जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह-जगह से मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए।
Welcome back. You're tuned in to Modi in America, a special live and rolling coverage on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States. Remember, this is his maiden state visit and a lot rests upon this visit as well. I'm also joined in by my guest Lester Munson, who's a senior fellow of the National Security Institute. And before I go to Lester, let me also break down those visuals that you can see on your screen. On the left side of your screen are the latest visuals that have come in of Prime Minister landing in Washington, D.C. Remember, just a while ago, he enplaned from New York City for Washington, where he has now landed and will be attending a very important program that will be about skill building. And on the right side of your screen, you can see the Indian American community, which has been, attending Prime Minister's even in New York City, and now we can see them turn up in full force with a rousing welcome for the Indian Prime Minister at Washington, D.C. What lies at the heart of this visit? Let's try and dive deeper, and for that, let me quickly go across to Lester. Lester, what's also catching our attention is none of the important statements that have been released so far as this meet is concerned mention China. But yes, the White House has in fact quoted President Biden saying that he wants to ensure that there's a free, open and prosperous Indo-Pacific. That of course goes on to very directly take an aim at what China is doing as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned and the kind of security threats that it's been posing.
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I suppose good for the White House for being a little diplomatic in the terms that they use. I suppose we don't want to make it obvious that this is all about China. And in fact, it's not all about China at all. The bilateral relationship between the U.S. and India has its own story, has grown a great deal over the last couple of decades. This visit is very significant. Yes, it's the first state dinner. There's a symbolic significance to that. It's more than just a fancy dinner in the White House. This is an indication of very strong ties between the two countries. Those are similar interests, whether security or economic, but also very similar values. And it's the values of democracy, respect for the rule of law that are what really draw the United States and India together. If that were not true, this relationship would not have grown over the years the way it has, and it would not be sustainable going into the future. So I think it's just important to remember that while we do talk about current events and the rise of China and the challenge that poses for a lot of countries in the world, what's really going on here is kind of a solidification of a friendship and a sense of shared values that is deep and genuine.
Absolutely, and when it comes to that, shared friendship and those values, we know that China is also one topic that India and the United States are on the same page about. But there's Russia, where the differences arise. And Lester, I'm going to delve deeper into that after a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more in terms of Prime Minister's visit to the United States. We'll be back after a short break.
आ रही हैं, जहां जहां रुक रही हैं, वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। आ रही हैं, जहां जहां रुक रही हैं, वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। रहे हैं, जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं, वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से मोदी मोदी के नारे भी सुनने को मिल रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के न्यूयॉर्क प्रस्थान से पहले ये दृश्य जहां भारतवंशी उपस्थित हैं अपने प्रधानमंत्री का अभिनंदन करने के लिए। जहां जहां रुक रहे हैं वहां भारी संख्या में लोग भी उपस्थित हैं उनका स्वागत करने के लिए, उनका अभिनंदन करने के लिए, और जगह जगह से।
Thank you for staying with our live and continuous coverage of Modi in America. As you can see, those are the live visuals of Indian Prime Minister arriving in Washington DC. He has finally stepped out of the airport and will be embarking, and you can see the cavalcade is in full preps as far as Prime Minister his arrival in Washington DC is concerned. Let me also give you a quick recap in terms of what you can expect from Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington DC. You already saw those visuals as Prime Minister Modi was disembarking the aircraft. We just got a glimpse of Prime Minister Modi, in fact, passing by his cavalcade. He's all set to now leave for a very significant, important program which will be focused on skilling for the future. This initiative, of course, aims to prioritize skill development and capacity building for the younger population, especially with the rise in terms of dependency on artificial intelligence, as we've also discussed with our previous guest. What is the significance of such an initiative means a lot for both the countries, not just India, but also the United States and the labor force of the Indian American community that is also a sizable population in the United States. Following this, there will be a private engagement between Prime Minister Modi and the US President Joe Biden. It is going to be day 2 of Prime Minister's visit, and this will also be marked by several formal bilateral meetings, not just between the President and the Prime Minister, but also between delegations of both the countries. Equally important is going to be Prime Minister Modi's address to the US Congress, which will also be followed by a grand reception. This day will be culminating in a ceremonial state dinner, which will be hosted by US President Joe Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden. On that note, let me quickly bring in Lester, who's been very patiently awaiting his turn. Thank you, Lester, for staying on. As we were discussing, let's talk about the differences. Okay, and as we speak, I can also see Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar arriving amid chants of Bharat Mata Ki Jai. The euphoria and the excitement on the ground level is palpable, not just for the Indian Prime Minister, but we can see India's Foreign Minister being greeted by the American delegation and Indian dignitaries present in Washington DC at the airport. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, flanked by a host of dignitaries over there. Lester, let's talk about the differences that may just arrive. What do you think will be the crucial challenges for India and the United States, especially when it comes to the difficult topics that will arrive on the table, and how are Biden and Modi likely to navigate those difficult topics?
Well, I think the issue that will be the most interesting discussion will be the issue of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I'm sure President Biden is hoping that the Prime Minister will lean in a little bit more on the side of the Ukrainians on that issue. A conflict with Ukraine moving to push out Russian invaders in a real counter-offensive that has begun in the last few days. So this is a critical time in Ukraine, and I think President Biden
पहुंच चुके हैं और अब अपने विमान से बाहर आते हुए तो साफ तौर पर कहीं ना कहीं ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण पूरा ये जो इनकी यात्रा है वो काफी महत्वपूर्ण है और आप देख सकते हैं तमाम गणमान्य यहाँ पर पहले से उपस्थित उनके स्वागत के लिए, उनके सत्कार के लिए। और आप देख सकते हैं कि भारत का झंडा किस तरह से यहाँ पर लहराता हुआ नजर आ रहा है। ये तस्वीरें बहुत कुछ कह रही हैं। दोनों देशों के बीच जो मजबूत होते रिश्ते हैं वो और कैसे आगे एक नए कीर्तिमान की तरफ आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, वो कहीं ना कहीं ये इस दौरे से साफ तौर पर जाहिर हो रहा है। और देख सकते हैं कि फूल देकर प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी का यहाँ पर स्वागत किया गया है और अब से कुछ ही देर में तमाम जो कार्यक्रम है प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी के वो आगे उनकी शुरुआत होगी। लेकिन आप इन तस्वीरों को देखिए, एयरपोर्ट वॉशिंगटन डीसी की ये तस्वीरें हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं जहां पर प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी पहुंच चुके हैं और बच्चों के साथ, जैसा कि हम जानते हैं कि संवाद पहले भी देखने को मिला है और ऐसे में अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर भी जब प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जाते हैं तो बच्चों के साथ किस तरह से उनका एक संवाद होता है, जिस तरह से वो मिलते हैं और आप देख सकते हैं कि यहाँ पर उनके साथ तस्वीरें भी खिंचवाई जा रही हैं। तो कहीं ना कहीं काफी ये महत्वपूर्ण हो जाता है। प्रधानमंत्री बच्चों से लेकर ये साफ तौर पर कीर्तिमान तमाम देखे गए हैं और वैश्विक पटल पर भी हमने देखा है कि प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी को उनकी एक झलक पाने के लिए लोग पहले से बेताब नजर आते हैं। तो ये तस्वीरें बहुत कुछ कह सकती हैं और साफ तौर पर आप देख सकते हैं, हालांकि वहां पर बारिश हो रही है जैसा कि हम तस्वीरों के जरिए भी देख रहे हैं। अशोक जी, जैसा कि हम देख रहे हैं कि तमाम यहाँ पर स्वागत के लिए लोग यहाँ पर
बिल्कुल गौरव, सुबह से जब यहाँ पर बारिश हो रही थी तो ऐसा लग रहा था कि ये बारिश जो है शायद लोगों के उत्साह पर जो है उत्साह को थोड़ा